In 1965, our Rabbi Emeritus, Daniel Friedman, was looking for a job. He had been working as an assistant rabbi at the Reformed Temple KAM Isaiah Israel on the south side of Chicago, where it still is. But at that temple, he had gotten in trouble. He'd gotten in trouble for saying what he really thought about ethics, about theology, and about religion itself. It was so bad that he was left in charge for the summer, and they called the senior rabbi to come back because the rabbi he'd left in charge was saying all these shocking things. Rabbi Friedman applied to many jobs, but he wasn't getting anywhere. He was debating moving to take a job at a Hillel on college campus or maybe another profession. And then he received an interview at a small suburban congregation in the undeveloped wilderness known as Deerfield. Back then it was pretty undeveloped in 1965. He came in to his meeting with the search commission, and he brought some pages, I was going to say photocopied, but probably mimeographed from 1965. He brought in some mimeographed pages from the Union Prayer Book, which was the Reform Movement's standard prayer book. And he asked the members of the interview committee, "Do you actually believe what it says here?" And they loved it. Interesting, different, challenging. And thus began his 35-year tenure with Congregation Beth Or and the first seeds of humanistic Judaism in Chicagoland. Ultimately, Rabbi Friedman became acquainted with Rabbi Sherwin Wine in Detroit, who had started what he called humanistic Judaism. Rabbi Friedman called what he was doing rational Judaism, but it was tomato, tomato, it was the same idea, and they found a common ground. Now, that was in 1965. When humanistic Judaism itself was radical, was shocking. But today, we're a lot more conventional, and we haven't changed all that much. Today, conservative Judaism will ordain gay rabbis. Now, the conservative movement didn't even ordain women rabbis until 1985. Today, even parts of the modern Orthodox world will ordain women rabbis or women to serve in rabbinic functions. So we're not so radical accepting gay rabbis, accepting women rabbis. That's par for the course. Today, Reform Judaism welcomes intercultural and interfaith families and couples. And a majority of Reform rabbis will officiate at intermarriage ceremonies. In the 1960s, almost none would. They wouldn't advertise it publicly. You might get married secretly in a rabbi's office with nobody there. It kept Rabbi Friedman very busy when he was one of the only 2 or 3 rabbis in the entire Chicago area willing to celebrate love across boundaries. But today, that's old news. They're welcome everywhere. Today, Reconstructionist and Jewish renewal seminaries will ordain rabbis who themselves are intermarried. There was some hoopla at the Reconstructionist Rabbinical College a few years ago when they made that decision, but now that is the rule. And today, all of those varieties of liberal Judaism, from conservative through Reconstructionist and renewal, they all emphasize and act on social responsibility, the concept of tikkun olam, repairing the world. They celebrate diversity. And today, many Reformed Jewish, Reconstructionist, renewal Jewish congregations, many liberal Jewish congregations will say, you don't have to believe in a personal God to be Jewish. Sorta. In 1999, the Reform movement issued a revision of their old Pittsburgh platform. In 1885, they issued a very radical platform. So in 1999, they went back to Pittsburgh to walk it back a little bit. And one of the principles in that 1999 Pittsburgh platform said, quote, "We affirm the reality and oneness of God, even as we may differ in our understanding of the divine presence." They also released, along with the statement, a few years later, a commentary on the statement to explain what they meant by what they said. And on that particular passage, on that question of we differ in our understandings of the divine, here's what their commentary says. There is room in Reform Judaism for a variety of understandings of God's reality, including individuals who are not sure whether they believe in God or who think that they do not believe in God. Jews who are members of a movement that affirms God's reality suggest by their membership they are willing to continue to wrestle with that reality, as befits their membership in the people Israel, from the Hebrew Yisrael, which in the Torah is defined as the one who wrestles with God and human beings and has prevailed. So in a world where many denominations will ordain women rabbis and gay rabbis, will accept intercultural, interfaith families, emphasize human action, and are kind of God-optional in their theology, why bother with a separate humanistic Judaism? At Kol Hadash, we say, you saw on the sign when you walked in, we do Jewish differently. But what's so different about us? In a phrase, we say what we believe. We seek the truth as best we can discover it, and we speak what we believe to be true. And this means some changes in Jewish life. But one of the truths that we believe, based on the evidence, is that Jewish culture has always changed. The animal sacrifice in the Jerusalem temple gave way to the recitation of texts of the Torah in synagogues, even before that temple was destroyed. And then we witnessed the evolving rabbinic prayer book over hundreds of years to create blessings and recitations and rituals. What's the proper blessing over bread? Does chicken count as meat to separate dairy from meat? What counts as the end of one day and the beginning of another? These were all debated by the early rabbis. They were refined by later rabbis. They were expanded on by still later rabbis. They were edited by early modern rabbis, and today they're ignored by the majority of Jews most of the time. Jewish people created Jewish culture, and we can and should adapt Jewish culture to reflect our values and beliefs today. Now, these facts about Jewish cultural and historical and theological evolution and the broad secularization of Jewish practice today, these are true. And we say what we believe about Jewish practices and Jewish evolution, even if it means change, because change is the real Jewish tradition. We say what we believe about the Jewish past. Who wrote the Torah and when? Was it Moses receiving divine dictation on Sinai, or multiple sources over multiple centuries edited together? Were the Maccabees really heroes of religious freedom, or were they imposers of Jewish fundamentalism, let alone the story of the miracle of the oil? Did the Exodus from Egypt really happen, or is it a story? Now, liberal rabbis in their seminaries learn historical truths about these questions, just like humanistic rabbis do. But when it comes time to take the Torah out of the ark, what should you say? Well, the traditional blessing is Zot HaTorah. This is the Torah that Moses placed before the children of Israel from the mouth of God by the hand of Moses. But what if you think it was written over many centuries with many editors and Moses may never have existed? Do you say the old words because they're traditional, or do you say what you believe? Do you say what you learn? Do you say what the facts support? When you're teaching Sunday school, do the students get taught the traditional story, or do they learn the more complicated history that reality suggests? Does your Passover Haggadah mention just the Exodus story, or does it also touch on archaeology once in a while? Now, our holidays do not have to become boring college history lectures, but we can find a way to harmonize poetically between traditional and literary themes, and also what we believe actually happened, if we say what we believe about the Jewish past. There was a famous incident about 25 years ago where a conservative rabbi at the Congregational Seder said the Exodus didn't really happen the way it says in the Haggadah, and his members were shocked. They were shocked because whenever they took the Torah out, they said, this is the Torah that Moses placed before the children of Israel. It is the Torah Emet, the Torah of truth. They were confused because their Haggadah said nothing of archaeology or history. My favorite comment was one member who said, did he have to say it at the Seder? Couldn't he have just kept that to himself for the observance and leave it in the classroom? Well, from our perspective, no. We say what we believe, and we don't want to say what we don't believe. If it's a story, great, we can tell the story. We don't tell the story as if it was history. We say what we believe about Jewish freedom. My first year at Kol Hadash, we didn't have a regular schedule of services. It was a more compressed schedule, and I was on my own. My wife wasn't in town, so I decided I was up early. I'm going out for breakfast on Yom Kippur morning. And I mentioned this to someone as I came to services. And they said, well, what if somebody saw you there? I would have responded, what are you doing here? You see, we don't have a differing standard for rabbis or everybody else. The rabbi is not the designated Jew. There's no thinking one way in the synagogue and one way in science class or in university or out there in the regular world. Keeping kosher is one option in Jewish food culture. A non-kosher deli is also Jewish food. Chinese food is Jewish food one specific day every year. Some people choose to fast on Yom Kippur. Others do not. What this does for us as a community is it inspires us to consider those who don't get to choose whether or not they eat or have a safe home, and to do good with that impulse. And it's also an affirmation that we are heirs to Jewish culture. We are not museum curators who must preserve everything in amber, never to change. When you're an heir, it becomes yours, and you may adapt it to new purposes. You can choose from it what's relevant and speaks to you. You can create anew and then pass that on to your descendants. Most vividly, we say what we believe about ethics, life, the universe, and everything, in any language, in every setting. Our beliefs and values sometimes agree with our ancestors. When it says in Leviticus, love your neighbor as yourself. When it says in the Talmud, do not say one thing in the mouth and a different thing in the heart. And sometimes our beliefs and values are very different from our ancestors. How we treat women and the rest of the world that is not Jewish. How we decide what is right and wrong based on consequences rather than commandments. Those have changed. Others in the liberal Jewish world argue that continuity with the past and preserving the language and liturgy of our ancestors is more important. And maybe we can reinterpret those old words differently, creatively, to harmonize our personal philosophy and lifestyle with our religious inheritance. If you go to a Reformed synagogue, you'll hear the word tradition a lot, which is ironic, given how much they've changed. But the more you change, the more you emphasize what you've kept. In our case, we're willing to admit the change. Now, for those who choose, they are certainly free to redefine traditional prayers, to use a creative translation while the Hebrew still talks to a male king who rules the universe, a God who cares what you eat and who you love, a God who rewards the righteous and punishes the wicked. If you want to use those words, you can. But we find it more resonant to say what we believe. If we believe that people bring whatever justice we can to the universe, then we'll celebrate what people can achieve and work that much harder ourselves to do better. If we appreciate the natural world's beauty and its sustenance, we can praise those. A consistent humanistic Judaism offers the comfort and inspiration of clear consistency, of deep integrity, of appropriate continuity when our beliefs do harmonize with our inheritance, and a creative opportunity when we must speak for ourselves. We say and sing what we believe about life and the universe because the dignity of truth is its own reward. Our Jewish ancestors refused to say words they did not believe. They insisted on affirming what they did believe, despite persecution and oppression. They changed and adapted Judaism over the centuries to respond to new circumstances and, yes, to new beliefs. And as we change what they created, we actually honor them. The Israeli poet Yehuda Amichai put it very well in a short poem. drawing on the rabbinic legend of Abraham smashing his father Terach's idols in his monotheistic zeal. The story is that Terach, Abraham's father, created idols and sold them, and Abraham was in charge of watching the workshop. And so one night, having been convinced there was only one God who did not want any statues, Abraham took a hammer and smashed all the other statues in the workshop except for one, and left the hammer leaning against that large idol left standing. The next morning when Terach came in, he saw all the statues had been smashed, and he said to Abraham, "What have you done? Why did you smash all the statues?" Abraham said, "I didn't do it. That statue there did all the smashing," because they got in an argument. His father said to him, "Abraham, you know that that statue can't do anything. I made it yesterday." Abraham said, "Aha! Why do you worship it then?" Well, what Amichai does is take it one step further. If Abraham smashed his father's idols, maybe it's time to do it again. We are all sons of Abraham, but we are also grandchildren of Terach, the father of Abraham. Perhaps now the time has come for the grandchildren to do to their father what he did to his father when he smashed his images and idols, his faith and belief. But that too will be the beginning of a new religion. Ours, in Humanistic Judaism, is the continuity of change.